you for joining us today. I'm Taryn. I'm filling in for the anchor spot, usually sat in by Joe. We are joined today by Scott, as well as Dom and Justine. And did anyone else feel an earthquake right before this started?
Nothing here.
Like all the way in Philadelphia. Dom's in Philadelphia. You felt the earthquake?
I did, and my rugby team group chat is blowing up about it. So it wasn't just me. It wasn't in my head. It definitely happened here.
Well, hopefully that was the only one we're all going to feel today. On the show this morning, we're going to be covering the latest news out of Gaza, where Israel has killed 7 aid workers, and a lot of people who might have been a little bit more on the fence about the ceasefire have now decided to call for an immediate ceasefire. We're going to discuss that. We've got Justine on the show today because she's going to be sharing with us a little bit about this recent campaign that just wrapped this week. Out of New York State, the Leave It Blank campaign, where much like is being done in other states such as Michigan, voters on a very short amount of time were able to turn out folks to cast blank ballots to send their objections to the Democratic Party and Joe Biden in particular, demanding that he do what it takes to immediately stop this nonsense genocide garbage that's been going on now for 6 months. After that, we will have a War on Woke update. This is Dom here with our Sports Center. We'll be discussing the WNBA. We've also got a really weird road rage incident that we want to touch on. And then Scott's going to speak a little bit about the importance of our libraries and why it is that the ultra-right keeps on wanting to shut them down. Then we've got our mailbag, and then we will have our plug at the end of the show discussing our convention season and the PW Fund Drive. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. First up, we want to talk about what has been going on in Gaza. This week, an organization called the World Central Kitchen was doing operations in the middle of the night in coordination with the Israeli military. And yet, as you can see with the photo we've used to illustrate this point, the Israeli military decided to throw a missile into their convoy, killing 7 aid workers. As I understand it, the first convoy was hit with a missile, and the survivors went to the second vehicle, which was then also hit with a missile. And then the wounded who had survived from the second vehicle went to the third vehicle, and that was the third missile that then annihilated 7 aid workers. Scott, do you think that this was an accident from the Israeli government?
Absolutely not. I mean, there's one area in which the Israeli military and the Israeli defense industry has kind of an advantage over the United States. One area they sort of excel at, and that is the sort of surveillance and intelligence gathering, and the kind of tech end of things. And to say that a military with the world's most advanced sort of electronic surveillance and intelligence gathering equipment may like accidentally, 3 times in a row bombed cars that were carrying people delivering food to starving people in Gaza. No, that's not an accident. That's a part of this genocide that is unfolding. Israel is using starvation. It is using the cutting off access to water, in addition to airstrikes to pursue this policy of genocide against Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really bad, I guess it's cynical to say PR move. But Dom, why do you think it is that the Israeli government, after making assurances to the United States and the United Nations that they were going to do everything in their power to get aid to Gazans, which they have actually put in this situation to begin with, through this genocidal war, 6 months long now, why do you think that they did it? If it wasn't an accident, Dom, why did they do it?
I think it's because despite what they say, they have an end goal in mind. And that's not, it has nothing to do with uh, Hamas, or it has nothing to do with, some sort of a strategy to go after Hamas while protecting civilians in Palestine, and it has everything to do with their broader goal to occupy Gaza as well as other areas of occupied Palestine. That's what their goal is, and they're using genocidal tactics to do that. And like as Scott said, stopping aid and food from getting to the people who are starving. This is all a part of their plan, and yes, they're saying that this is not what we want to do. Things this X, Y, and Z is an accident. ABC is our plan, but it's very obvious and very clear that's not their plan. And what their real intentions are sort of coming to light as they make these quote unquote mistakes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Justine, I used to be an aid worker actually overseas, and there is sort of a degree of risk that you're taking when you do go to a place like Gaza to try and deliver food to people. And, obviously, this organization tried to take all of the measures it could to coordinate with the Israeli military. I think part of the outrage is actually that folks are like, well, wait a minute. I thought that they were also in Israel a few months ago serving people meals. Why is it that you are going after this celebrity chef nonprofit? But I think it's also really interesting that you do hear voices who have, been so far a little bit more moderate on the issue. Like the head of the World Central Kitchen, this guy Jose Andres, it seems as though this sort of broke something in him. And I understand he knew some of the people who died personally, but are 13,000 dead children not enough? Like, why is it that all of the sudden there's this outrage about these 7 workers who, I think almost all of them had nationality that was either in Europe or Australia. But why, like, are 13,000 dead kids not enough to make people want to say, stop it right now?
Obviously, 13,000 dead kids should be enough, which is why we have been calling for a ceasefire from day one, because we knew that it was going to get to this point. Um, as everyone has said, this is not an accident. Even before this particular siege, this particular genocidal siege on Gaza, Israel, the IDF, has been targeting um, aid workers and healthcare workers um, in Gaza,
Mhm.
in the West Bank, even for decades. That it's just that now there are enough people paying attention that more people are noticing. Um, I think it is a real shame that it takes so much for some people to finally come over and call for the right thing. I am happy though that more people are, because hopefully with enough pressure we can actually save some lives and prevent more death and more genocide of the Palestinians. But it absolutely was, as we all know, not an accident at all. Um, the the Israeli government was given the exact coordinates where the aid workers would be, with the uh, hope that they would then not target those areas. And it seems, as we can see, that they then took that information and used it to target the aid workers, because this is a genocidal mission. So hopefully, um, this does help increase the pressure, along with all the other, um, you know, activism and all the other movements that are pushing for it, so that we can actually get some, not just aid, but real security to the people of Gaza.
Yeah, I appreciate you making that point, Justine. um, because this isn't a video game, right? Like, we're trying to stop a genocide from happening. This situation threatens us all very greatly. Obviously, it affects some populations more than others, but if this is going to be something that throws the election this year into turmoil, then that's something that we should all have to deeply worry about. I know that we've been discussing on the show this last 6 months a lot about Palestine, a lot about Gaza, and perhaps there are some viewers out there who say, well, what's the big deal with that? Why is it you're always focusing on what's going on overseas? It's because it has a very, very, very real connection to what it is that we are going through in the United States, right? It's the US tax money that is financing this war. It is the US tax money and diplomatic cover that is basically enabling this genocide. I liked the graphic that we had up earlier that pointed out how there have been hundreds of aid workers who have died during this genocide. There have been hundreds of academics and hundreds of healthcare workers, if not thousands, who have been killed. We have to understand that genocide is not just about body count, right? Genocide is about destroying the institutions that any society needs to exist. And that would include education, that would include healthcare, and that would also include access to food. And so when we call this a genocide, we are being dead serious. When the UN calls it a genocide, we're being dead serious, and it has to stop now. But I mean, are we
Karen?
also yes, go ahead, Scott. I was
Oh, no,
going to
sorry,
just
I
ask.
interrupted you. I'll jump in after you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was actually going to ask you, what else sort of is in this larger danger that we might be missing here when we're looking at what it is that's coming from Gaza right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think getting to the earlier point about, why are people so slow to come out against this? I think part of it has to do with the amount of resources that have been spent on making the Palestinian people seem expendable, seem unimportant, to dehumanize them, to push them aside, to make them seem unimportant. That influences people. But also, especially here in the United States, people have been so, the ruling class is so intent on preventing people from taking action and demanding their democratic right to influence foreign policy. Right?
Mhm.
Foreign policy has been off the table for the people of the United States for a long time, and now people are learning how to assert their right to democratic control over that foreign policy, and there's a learning curve, and I think we're getting there. But the bigger danger, you're right, it's not only that this could fracture the anti-fascist coalition and lead to a really disastrous result in the elections, it's also that it's escalating the war danger. So the Israeli government has now struck targets on Iranian soil, that is at the Iranian embassy in Damascus.
Mhm.
And even the United States has taken its distance there, saying, telling Iran that we didn't have anything to do with it, that wasn't us, we're not involved. Right? The risk of an escalation into a regional, and in fact even into a world war is very real, and it has to be stopped.
Right. So let's shift the agenda then, and let's talk a little bit about what it is that is being done. Right. So Justine, would you like to give us a little summary about what's been going on with the Leave It Blank New York campaign?
I would love to. Thank you. Yeah, so um, as all of us have made clear, we're incredibly outraged by the genocidal siege that has been happening over the last 6 months, as are the vast majority of the population in the United States. And we've seen a lot of different forces pushing for a ceasefire. And one of the ways that people have been calling for a ceasefire is through the ballot box. So, Taryn, as you mentioned, this started in Michigan. Um, earlier this year, there was an uncommitted movement that grew there. More than, something around 13%, was it, that voted uncommitted in the Democratic primary, saying that they would not commit to vote for Biden because he is not calling for genocide. He is not doing anything in his power to stop the war. And as you say, we are funding this war. We are giving cover to this war. Our tax dollars and our governments um, have so much complicity in what's going on. And it is our duty to fight back and to stop them. And this outpouring of voter fight back was really inspiring to the rest of the country. And we have been seeing uncommitted votes happen all over the place. Hundreds of thousands of voters at this point have cast ballots to be a part of this movement. So in New York, um, we did not have an option to vote uncommitted. And so a bunch of activists got together and they thought, what can we do? How can we send this same message when we're not given that democratic option to vote uncommitted? And dozens of organizations came together. The DSA, the Working Families Party, all of the big Muslim groups and JVP Action, all the different Jewish groups, local community groups, they came together and they said, you know what we can do? We can cast blank ballots. We can say, you're not getting any vote from us until you do something to stop this genocide. And this popular movement, this campaign, it came together in just 3 weeks. And in 3 weeks' time, the word was got out all over the state, up and down state. More than 40,000 ballots were cast blank. We don't have the final numbers right now, but from estimates, it looks like about 12% of people that voted cast a blank ballot. And that compares to normally blanks get less than 1% because usually it's from some sort of accident that people vote blank. But this was a very purposeful um, movement, and it's incredibly inspiring to see the Ceasefire Coalition come together like this. And I know that the movement is not going to stop. I know a lot of people now are going to start making calls for other states in upcoming primaries because the uncommitted movement is growing nationally and helping each other nationally. So that'll be part of it. And I'm excited to see what other things that we can do together to, build towards a ceasefire and then ultimately, a free and democratic Palestine as well.
Yeah, no, those results are very impressive, especially because I remember it was pouring rain on Tuesday, at least where I was. I mean, I really had to put the waders on to get down to the polls. And so I do think that it was a tremendous accomplishment. Dom, do you think it's working? Do you think that these votes that are uncommitted, do you think that these, various resolutions that are being passed at the municipal level, these statements being signed on to, do you feel like it's having any impact at this point?
I do, yeah. I think the uncommitted vote in various states, like Michigan and New York, as Justine said, and the resolutions being passed at cities as big as Detroit and as small as some other small town that I'm sure has passed one. It really has put a lot of pressure on Biden. I remember hearing a few months ago that Biden and Bibi had a call together once when he was the vice president, and he said something along the lines of he was, his only ally in the Obama administration, and now here we are. He's having calls with him, telling him, look, dude, it's not, this, I don't know how to work with you here. So, yes, I think the pressure that Biden is facing as it relates to Palestine and Gaza is working, and we need to sort of build off of this momentum and find new ways, such as the uncommitted campaign and the Leave It Blank campaign, to pressure Biden and make sure he doesn't see an inch or ounce of an inch and ounce of relief. We need to continue to pressure him because there are lives on the line here, and it's absolutely imperative.
Right. Yeah, no, we welcome the increased involvement of every level of society in getting this done. Like, you can say a lot about Jose Andres or whatever, and you could say a lot about people who might have been tepidly on the fence, but like, we welcome people changing their minds, because that's what it is that we are working towards, and it's arduous work. But Scott, so I understand there's also going to be a movement in Pennsylvania around casting uncommitted votes, which hopefully, Biden will actually listen to a swing state. Of course, Michigan is also a big concern. But Scott, why is it that we, as the Communist Party, while we are excited to see Democrats give their own party hell, fighting against this stuff, why is it that we, as the Communist Party, are not actually endorsing these campaigns, right? Like, our activists might be involved out in communities. Obviously, I went and voted blank. But why is it that the Communist Party is not endorsing these campaigns?
Well, for the same reason that, we would not look kindly on it if the DNC decided to endorse or take a position on something internal to our party, right? That's the Democratic Party. They have, their business. Their primary process is something for their party, and for, in most cases, people who are registered to vote in Democratic primaries. So while, yeah, as communists, we support any attempt to use the mechanisms of democracy to push back against this genocidal war. We don't come out and say, yeah, that we don't endorse candidates or movements against candidates or anything like that. That's the business, again, of the Democratic Party and its registered voters.
For sure. Yeah. No, thanks for that. One more point before we move the agenda. I think it was Scott that you brought up this article, basically positing that the Palestinian solidarity movement in the United States has just like spun out of control. And when I think about going out in the rain and voting on Tuesday, it felt like, well, I don't know if I'm that crazy. I don't feel like this is that wild. Do we feel, just anyone who wants to answer this question, do we feel as though the efforts to try and paint this as a fringe, violent, anti-Semitic movement, do we feel like that is working? Or do we feel as though, perhaps for the first time, at least since I've been in the struggle, that there has been effective pushback to that end? And that's to anyone who wants to answer the question before we move on. Justine, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing real pushback. Of course, I mean, we see that not just on our ground, not just on the ground where we're active in these grassroots struggles anecdotally, but we also see CNN anchors, talking about, not just the horrors and misery of what's happening in Gaza, but they're saying, hey, Joe Biden and the Democrats need to stop writing this off, and they need to stop being so flippant. Hillary Clinton needs to stop making these flippant remarks. You're seeing very centrist, sort of Democratic stalwart journalists making these comments and making this commentary. So I think that kind of indication is what shows that that propaganda that they're trying to push to say that this is fringe, that it is not fringe, that this call for a ceasefire is coming from all levels of society, as you said.
That's right. Yeah, no, for sure. And speaking of grassroots, oh, go ahead, Dom. I was just about to ask you, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the idea that advocating for Palestinians or criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic is in itself anti-Semitic, in that Israel thrives and exists largely due to anti-Semitism, particularly in the West. How else are you able to convince people from the West to move there? It really there's this conception, that the anti-Semitic conception that particularly Jewish men are weak and in emasculating way. So what does Israel do? They say, hey, if you come over here, you can join the IDF and be a macho man and be and have and be amongst the wealthy and things like that, where in the United States or in other countries in the West, you may be working class, you may be living paycheck to paycheck, and the people over there don't see you as a man, they emasculate you. And that in and of itself is anti-Semitic. It propagates and thrives off of anti-Semitic ideas, and it's a shanda. It's a shame. It's disgusting what they say and how they reify anti-Semitism. I'm sure within their own country and also within the West. So the idea that criticizing Israel or that taking a stance against Israel's actions is anti-Semitic is not the case at all when you really look into what they do and what they say, and their propaganda machine and their intelligence apparatus, as Scott described earlier.
No, for sure. And also, Dom, just to speak to the grassroots involvement that Justine was referring to, would you like to share any information that you might have on this uncommitted PA campaign before we turn the page here? How people might get
Yes,
involved, get in touch?
yes, there some close friends and allies and comrades of mine are involved in the uncommitted campaign in Pennsylvania. I believe the socials is uncommitted PA. You can find it on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I believe too. So if you're a Pennsylvanian, Philadelphian, if you live in Pittsburgh, a Yinzer, as they say, definitely check out uncommitted PA if you're a Democratic voter, because the movement is growing and we have to continue to pressure Biden.
Right. Not in our name, not from the Jewish community, not from the Democratic Party, not from our labor unions, not in our name. Stop it. End this now. It's absolutely a shanda. It's totally, yes. But let's go ahead and turn the page real quick. We're going to go to the second segment of the show, or sorry, the third segment of the show on paper here. We're going to discuss the war on woke. So we're talking about the war on Gaza, and we're talking about the war on woke. And maybe that seems a little bit flippant, but I'm sure that as Marxist Leninists here, we can all agree that there actually is sort of a connection between these two things. But I do want to toss it over to Dom so that you can introduce the topic of our sports segment today, which has to do with the war on woke. So please.
Yes, just I guess really quickly, or maybe not so quickly. If anyone has their brackets for March Madness, the men's bracket and the women's bracket, particularly the women's bracket, has been really interesting this year, and that sort of interest and spotlight has grown over the last 2 or 3 years. And I believe it was Monday, Caitlin Clark in Iowa took on LSU and Angel Reese and Kim Mulkey. That's a different story. But yes, they played, and Iowa wound up winning, maybe unfortunately or fortunately, depending on who you were rooting for there. But Angel Reese made some interesting comments after her loss at her post-game conference or presser. And she said that ever since last year's March Madness tournament and them winning the championship, that she's been getting tons of death threats and just really just depraved comments in general levied at her, and a lot of it it centers her race and her gender. It's really imbued with this sort of misogynoir that has, in my opinion, has really ramped up the last couple years with attacks on Black women. I mean, attacks on Black women has existed since Black women have entered the West, but particularly in the United States, as Black women sort of reach new heights, whether that's through athletics, whether that's through politics and professional life, attacks on them have really, really ramped up. Just recently, a journalist out of UCLA called her a villain and called her a debutante or something along those lines, which is really disgusting comments, which he later had to apologize for. But these are the sort of attacks that Black women face when they are successful in their chosen paths, like I said, whether that's athletics or professional life. And I think we can start with the fact that Angel Reese is a college student. You know what I mean? So number one, attacking her, I think that says more about the people attacking her than her herself. But also, uh, she the idea that she's a villain because she celebrates when she's successful, celebrates her wins as an athlete. No one ever makes those comments towards people in the NBA or people in the men's bracket. No one makes those comments towards them. Maybe they might make it in a jovial sense, but not in any real way that is aimed at tearing her down.
Hmm.
So yes, these comments that are levied at her are imbued in a, like I said, misogynoir, imbued in racism, imbued in misogyny, and it's unfortunate, and it's I would say it stinks. It sucks. It's horrible. It's a shanda that black women athletes have to face this when they're successful in their sports. I think Angel Reese is absolutely an inspiration to not only black women athletes but young black athletes and just athletes in general. And this is nothing to take away from Caitlin Clark necessarily. I think she's an inspiration as well. Caitlin Clark is one of the best basketball players, best athletes we've ever seen. But when that's the case, when we have these women reaching new heights and uh, putting on athletic performances to the likes that we've never seen, they deserve the same respect that you would give someone like LeBron James or Steph Curry or whoever else. These are great athletes too, and it's absolutely disgusting that the way that they get torn down, and I guess it's this like again like this war on woke where people say, well, we're not. It has nothing to do with her race. It has nothing to do with her gender. We just want her to be a little bit more humble. Well, no one ever. LeBron James literally calls himself the king. So
Right.
if no one is saying anything about LeBron James needing, and I guess they did for a time, but that's another story again. But if no one's saying anything about LeBron James literally calling himself the king, then I don't want to hear anyone say anything about Angel Reese for celebrating when she wins a basketball game. I don't. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Justine, do you play basketball?
Poorly.
Okay. Do you play it? That answers my second question. You don't play it professionally or competitively?
Correct.
Okay. So then what does this have to do with you, Justine? What is this situation of somebody who's really out in front of the camera, an African American woman who is playing college basketball here, who's got a lot of press? How does that affect you? Why is it that you care about this situation?
I mean, this affects all of us. As Dom mentioned, this kind of racism, these kinds of racist attacks have gotten worse, a lot worse over the last few years. And that's horrible. It's it's truly terrifying. And the ripple effects, go back throughout all of society. So when you see Black women targeted, you know others are next. So as a woman, I know that this is going to have ripple effects into, um, you know, how the far right thinks about womanhood, right? Because that's ultimately, a lot of ways what this is about. As Dom said, it's misogynoir. A big part of why Black athletes aren't criticized is unfortunately also part of racism, right? Because, at least from certain quarters, right? Like you have, um, that stereotype of Black men has always been right that they're strong and that they're for entertainment, and so when they're in that lane that white people have given them, they celebrate that. But Black women aren't stereotyped as being in that lane, so you get a lot of misogyny, you get a lot of transphobia against them. And I want to, yeah, Dom raised their hand, so I'd actually love to pass it back to them if that's okay,
Go on,
Karen.
Dom.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to the point about the sort of black athletes and the I don't know how to really describe it the way that people treat black bodies and athletics, and that people are totally fine with watching LeBron James, posterize someone. But as soon as LeBron James is talking about politics, what did that loser woman from Fox News say? Shut up and dribble. That's what happens, when black people are maneuvering outside of the lanes of what white supremacist conceptions believe is as acceptable. And this is the sort of thing that we have to fight, because if it's happening to people like LeBron James, if it's happening to people like Angel Reese and Lamar Jackson, as I talked about a couple months ago, and Russell Wilson, as I talked about a couple months ago, it's happening to Black workers in the workplace. And that's sort of I think the thing here is that, if we're not fighting it at the level where it's as most visible, then we're not going to be able to fight it in the workplace. We have to be able to attack it at all levels. It's not, and I think sometimes people have a hard time grasping, why should I care about these athletes who make millions of dollars? Well, their millions of dollars in actuality it pales in comparison to the millions and billions of dollars that the owners of these sports teams make, or administrators, I guess, in the case of college athletics. But also, again, like, working people look up to these people, and they see themselves in these people because of their own aspirations, but also they can relate to the treatment that they face in their own workplaces and in society in general. So I think it's really, really, I say this a lot, it is really, really, really important for socialists, leftists, communists, especially in this party, please, in this party, to attack these sort of racist, misogynistic attacks at every single chance. It doesn't matter that it's Angel Reese. It could be Angel Reese, or it could be Jane from the beauty supply store that works at the front desk, helps you find, whatever hair care products you need. It doesn't, it could be, LeBron James, or it could be, whoever, the guy who fixes your car, the guy who, delivers your Uber Eats. I don't know, wherever you work, wherever, I'm sure there's Black people who work everywhere. It doesn't, what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter. We have to be able to fight racism at every stop. We cannot afford to let up, because the far right that's what they want to do. They want to reify racism and misogyny in society, and we have to absolutely combat that at every single stop and every chance we get.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, if we're going to build towards workers being in charge of society, then we have to involve workers at all strata. And so we have to fight for workers, no matter their background, but particularly if they are, for instance, African-American women, we need to fight like hell for their inclusion. And as Dom was saying, fight against all manifestations of racism and misogyny and transphobia. But Scott, it's like, so we get this sort of war against woke, and it doesn't seem as though it's necessary. It makes the little guy, it makes us, a little bit more uncomfortable about existing in public. But it's not as though, it's not as though people are going to stop playing basketball. So why do you think in this period of time, as we've discussed, these attacks have been escalating, why do you think that this has become such a focus for the extreme right, going after women of color, going after women, people of color? Why has this become such an extreme focus in this time?
Well, I think it has to do with the same reason that that you kind of evoked with the backlash against the Palestinian solidarity work on college campuses. Opinions are changing. There's a massive kind of progressive and democratic, small d democratic upsurge in American society. There's a new level of political activism. There are for example, the rights of LGBTQ plus people, progress has been pretty steady and very broad, in fact, over the past decade or so. And it's only when you get that very broad sort of changes happening in all of society in a positive direction that you then get this intense backlash from the extreme right. So the people that are trying to portray Palestinian solidarity as, dangerous, anti-Semitic, fringe, canceling the free speech of others, are also the ones talking about the woke danger, the woke mob, right? This is what the right does when it knows it's losing. That's what is going on here, I think. Right. We still have to fight. It's not automatic, but they're losing and they're cornered.
Yeah. No, let's roll the producer. Could we roll the road rage tape? Have a little levity around this situation real quick.
I want to work for a woke company, like super woke. When I grow up,
So this is in Dallas, and as you can see, there's a situation on the road where cars are towing them. Listen to what this guy is listening to in the background.
When I
This guy
grow
was,
up, I want to
but this
work for a woke company, like super woke.
When I grow up,
I want to be hired based on what I look like,
rather than my skills, I want to be judged by my political beliefs,
I want to get promoted.
based on my chromosomes. When I grow up, I want to be offended by my coworkers and walk around the office
on eggshells,
and have my words policed
by HR. Words like
grandfather,
peanut gallery,
long time no see.
no can do.
When I grow up,
I want to be obsessed with emotional safety
And do workplace sensitivity training.
all day long. When I grow up, I want to climb.
so this is an actual commercial. So this guy who's like losing his mind on the road in Dallas, who's using his car as a weapon, this is like the soundtrack that he hears in his ear. And it's all, anti-woke, anti-woke. But the first thing I thought of is, wow, how could you catch a harder L? Like than being like, I want to go work for somebody who is like against equal rights for women and people of color, and someone who's anti-union and all of this other stuff. Like, how is it that workers are actually falling for this nonsense, Dom? Like, what's going on here? I can't think of a place I would want to put my resume out to less than that kind of spot. And I mean, I guess maybe that's their whole strategy, but what do you think about this?
Well, I think in some ways it's not working, and that's why they're doing this. That's why they have it on the airways and on the TV, and every time you open your laptop or turn on look at your phone and turn on the TV, you have these sort of ads playing because people it's just like we're beyond this. You know what I mean? Society has progressed to a place where we don't. I don't think most people want to hate their whatever neighbor. I don't think people feel this way, and that's why they're putting this stuff in the airways. They're constantly blasting you with it to really chip away at the people who can be convinced by this sort of stuff. And I think it's, as Scott said, this is sort of I think a last ditch effort by the far right to convince people and to reify again these sort of conceptions in society. And this is why I said earlier that we have to do everything in our power to fight it, because they I mean they have a ton of resources, and they're using them. Like I said, they have it on the airways, the TVs, the phones, even books. So we have to absolutely combat these sort of ideas and this sort of conceptions. And in a lot of ways, I think people aren't really falling with it. And why someone would want to work in a workplace like that, I have no idea. It seems boring to me.
It's like putting a peace sign on.
Exactly. And I have to say, it's these people, like they're always talking about, oh, well, if you can't, if you need a safe space and you're too sensitive, or if you need your pronouns respected, you're too sensitive. And it's like, well, if you can't, work in a workplace with a variety of diversity of people, maybe and there's something wrong with sensitivity. I don't believe that at all, but maybe you're the one who's sensitive if you can't be in a spend 8 hours a day or however long your shift is with people who aren't like you, or people who, at least appearance wise, that maybe you're the one who's sensitive. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, Justine, you're a union activist, you're a union organizer. Would it, I felt like this in particular seemed to really encapsulate that shop floor lesson of racism and sexism is used to divide our class. And that's why you need a union, is to basically push back against this stuff. But would you want to expand on that briefly about, the connection between anti-wokeness and probably not having a whole lot of rights at work? They have a whole handbook on their website about the rights that you have as an employee. And it's like, well, you can't, the government can't control, can't maintain your free speech at a private business, which is why you need to go work for a private business that believes in free speech. Like, what is that, Justine?
It's just brazen manipulation, and as Scott and Dom and you've all indicated, I mean, grasping at straws, because they know, while they have enough money to control the airwaves and try to take over our universities, and have other ways to get these messages out there, the vast majority of people disagree with them. And yeah, no, exactly. Just like you said, Taryn, I mean, this is exactly like what the boss tries to do in the workplace. Find ways to pit workers against each other and play up differences based on sex or sexuality or race or immigration status or disability or what have you. And um, when when you're in the kind of workplace where everyone's rights are respected, that is because not only that people are seeing beyond that kind of scam, it's because they're actively fighting it, often in a union struggle. So, um, you know, in our union in ALU at Amazon, it's an incredibly diverse workplace, and that's reflected in our union activism as well. And that was an active choice. You know, we actively work to make sure that we're able to bring together all workers, Black, white, Asian, various immigration statuses, and that we're all fighting together. And we've found that when we focus on what we have in common and what we all deserve as workers, fair treatment, fair wages, um, then yeah, it gets around all the nonsense. But that's what you have to focus on is the common struggles and how when the people that are hardest hit among us are raised up, that all of us are raised up. And we have to do that in the workplace. We have to do that in every segment of society to beat this
No, for
propaganda.
sure. Yeah, no, Scott, I want to move the agenda to the mailbag question, but since we have had this book up here, it's perfectly normal, which is about diversity. And I wanted to give you 30 seconds or so to talk about what's going on with the libraries and how that kind of connects to this war on woke.
Oh, I just so there are a couple of bills in Louisiana that aim to criminalize basically employees at public libraries, either for participating in events with the American Library Association or for having on the shelves items that could be considered obscene. That is anything that talks about really about sex in the very narrow reading of it. And so libraries have always been a big part of the struggle for democracy, whether it was the founding of the first public libraries in the period before the Revolutionary War, just after, I can't remember, but also in the McCarthy period when librarians refused to divulge the names of borrowers of books, and now in the fight against fascism today. So libraries are one of the core institutions of democracy, and we will defend them all the way.
Right. They're trying to brainwash us full spectrum. They're going after our libraries. They're going after our work employment situations. They're going after our sports heroes and heroines. They're trying to brainwash us. I don't really think could talk about woke as much as these people do. So maybe it is their problem. But let's move on to the mailbag so we can not go a whole hour on the show today. It's a great discussion so far. Our mailbag question is, and I'm going to give it to you first, Scott. If the CPA USA attains state power, how do you plan to prevent it from abusing that power?
Well, first of all, when we think of gaining state power, it's not CPUSA gaining state, it's the working class gaining state power. CPUSA is a revolutionary party of the working class. We're working toward that. We do not envision ourselves as, in a situation of one party control of the state that may have been used in other socialist experiments. It wouldn't work here. People are very used to a multi-party system. But the way we work for democracy is by working for democracy, right? The struggle for socialism grows out of the struggle for democracy, even now under capitalism. And that's where our roots are. So I think right now we are doing the work of learning how to expand democracy and put a working class, egalitarian, collective stamp on democracy.
Cool. Thank you for that answer. Dom, what do you think? How are we, because it's not just that we would take like the whole state. It's maybe you're running for mayor of a small town as a communist and you win. How is it that we would stamp out corruption or abuse of power in those situations?
Yeah, well, I think the topic of a broader state, as in the federal government, I think it's okay to say, we don't know, because we can't. I don't think we can we can't predict the future. Number one, none of us are Nostradamus, but also, I don't think that we can dictate from the top or impose, what we may believe is the right way to control or run a government onto working class people. As Scott said, I think we're at the behest of working people. We're a party of working people. So I don't think it's fair for me or for really anyone, and I don't think it would be correct to make a sort of judgment in that regard. But I think what I can say is that I believe that the working class will hold, whether it's a politician from our party or any party, when they're given the opportunity, when democracy is as expansive as it can be, that they will hold those politicians accountable. So I put my faith in the working class.
Nice. That's a good place to put it, I'd say. Yeah, for sure. What about you, Justine? Any ideas here?
Yeah. Well, first, I would like to point out, how we recognize that in the bourgeois democracy that is the United States, there's very little mechanism, if any, for the working class to currently have democratic control, right? Like the power that is entrenched by the capitalists right now. I mean, they're clearly abusing it, right? So it's just the way these questions sometimes um, get thought up by people because of the propaganda they've heard about socialist experiments, already puts us in this weird defensive position. But John's exactly right. Like, we can't lay out the exact minutia of our plan, but we can look to other socialist experiments. In China, in Vietnam, in Cuba, they have very active grassroots democracies, right? Active neighborhood committees that are always coming together to make decisions and have these long, hours long discussions. I mean, there's a lot we can do studying the Cuban referendum process from their
Right,
constitutional referendum six
right.
years ago, with millions of people participating in grassroots democracy in a way that we've not experienced in this country. And I think we would take lessons like that. We would take lessons from implementing democracy in our unions, which is one of the few places we have real working class democracy in this country. I mean, immigrants can vote in union elections that can't vote in any other kind of election, for example.
Yes.
And we would try to implement things like this as the party, and in coalition with other, popular working class forces. That's what I think.
Expanding democracy is key, absolutely. And now we are going to close out the show because we are going way over time today. Apologies at home. But before we wrap, I do want to remind everybody to please donate. The People's World Fund Drive is going on right now. We need to get that little temperature bar further up. So please, not only should you like and subscribe to this channel, but you should also open up a new tab, go to peoplesworld.org/donate, and then give what you can. Maybe you can give a little bit more next week, but it doesn't hurt to throw in a couple dollars today. So please do that. In the meanwhile, if you have any ideas for the show, if you have any pitches, if you have a segment you'd like us to address, please reach out to us at gmr@cpusa.org. Thank you so much to the panelists for sticking with us today. And until next week, stay strong, stay safe, and stay in the fight. Have a good weekend, everybody. Ceasefire now.
Bye.